Hi guys, tonight we begin a calm yet powerful journey into the Egyptian story of creation, a tale that rises out of endless waters, where nothing yet existed, and where even time had not begun. This is the story of how order came out of silence, how gods were born from the dark, and how the universe slowly unfolded into light and form. But before we begin, for those who enjoy quiet journeys into forgotten myths, hit that like button, subscribe, and share in the comments which legendary creature or mythological tale you want to see next. And don't forget to tell me where you're watching from. I love discovering new places where my stories reach. Imagine drifting through the stillness before the first dawn, listening as eternity whispers its first words. In the beginning, the ancient Egyptians believed that before the world, before the sky or the earth, there was only the primordial ocean, an infinite expanse of dark and motionless water they called none. It was not water like a river or sea, but an eternal abyss, without edge, without bottom, without beginning or end. In this vast nothingness, there was no sky above, no ground below, no sun, no stars, not even the air to breathe. It was complete silence, a timeless pause before creation stirred. Out of this infinite darkness, the potential for life was hidden, waiting to emerge, and the Egyptians pictured it like a seed lying quietly beneath the surface ready to awaken. They imagined that from within none arose a single mound of earth, the very first land pushing itself up above the endless waters. This mound was called the Ben, and it was the sacred symbol of the first moment of creation. It was said to shimmer with light, breaking the eternal night with its first golden glow. Upon this mound appeared the first god, Atum, a being who contained within himself all the power of creation. Atum was not born in the way humans are, nor did he come from parents. Instead, he was self-created, arising from the stillness because existence itself needed a beginning. The Egyptians often described him as standing alone, on the first piece of land, surrounded by endless water, aware of his solitude and yet filled with the power to bring forth everything that would follow. Atum carried within him the potential for all gods, all forms of life, and even the order that would shape the universe. But in that first moment, he was entirely alone, a solitary spark of being in a world that was still mostly nothing. To the Egyptians, this image of Atum emerging from the waters of Nun was not just a story, but a sacred truth about the cycle of life, that from darkness comes light, from silence comes voice, and from stillness comes creation. The mound itself became a powerful symbol across Egypt, reflected in the shape of their sacred pyramids, which rise like solidified rays of the first sunlight. In temples, priests would honor this memory of creation by raising sacred obelisks that pointed upward, echoing the first rising of the Ben. Atum, standing alone on the mound, felt the emptiness around him, and so he began the act of creation. From himself he brought forth two other deities, Shu, the god of air, and Tefnut, the goddess of moisture. Together they would continue the work of shaping the cosmos. With them, Atum was no longer alone, and the first balance of opposites began to form. Air and moisture, sky and water. These forces were the first hints of the pattern that would eventually give rise to the heavens, the earth, and all living beings. Yet in this earlier stage the world was still fragile, like a dream just beginning to take shape. The Egyptians told this story in quiet reverence, for it was not just the tale of their gods, but the story of existence itself, of how order emerged from chaos, how cosmos rose from the endless sea of nothing. When Atum brought forth Shu, the god of air, and Tefnut, the goddess of moisture, the Egyptians believed it was the first act that broke solitude into companionship and emptiness into balance. Shu was the breath, the invisible current that moves gently across the world, while Tefnut was the mist, the moist embrace that nourishes life. Together they represented the very beginnings of atmosphere and climate, the delicate forces that make the earth a place where living things could exist. But in those earliest days there was not yet earth or sky as we know them. Shu and Tefnut drifted into the boundless expanse of Nun, exploring the edges of the nothingness, separating themselves from their father Atum. Time passed, though time itself was still undefined, and Atum began to long for the children he had released into the vast waters. In one version of the tale, Atum sent out his sacred eye to search for Shu and Tefnut, an eye filled with divine fire that could see through the endless dark. When at last his children returned, Atum wept with joy. From his tears falling onto the mound of creation, human beings were said to have come into being. In this way, humanity was born not from force or command, but from emotion, tears of relief, and love. Shu and Tefnut then gave birth to the next divine pair, Geb, the god of earth, and Nut, the goddess of sky. With them, the cosmos began to take on its recognizable shape. Geb was imagined as the solid land stretching wide, his body forming mountains and valleys. Nut was pictured as a vast arched figure, her body glittering with stars, stretching above Geb to become the sky itself. But at first, they were joined tightly together, locked in an eternal embrace. The world was still compressed, with no space for life or air. It was Shu, their father, who stepped between them, using his strength to separate the earth and the sky. With arms raised, he lifted Nut upward, curving her body into the heavens, while Geb lay below, becoming the foundation of the land. This separation was not seen as cruelty, but as necessity, for it was only by dividing them that space for creation could exist. Between Geb and Nut stretched the air, the domain of Shu, and in that space the world could finally breathe. In Egyptian temples and art, this moment was remembered as one of the most sacred scenes, a cosmic act of balance. Nut was painted across ceilings, covered in golden stars, her body arching above worshippers, while Geb was carved below as the fertile earth, ready to support life. Their children would soon complete the framework of the cosmos, but already the essential pattern was clear. Chaos was giving way to order, and the universe was unfolding with deliberate harmony. With Geb as the earth and Nut as the sky, the stage of creation expanded into a canvas of limitless possibility. The Egyptians saw in this separation not just a physical act, but the establishment of cosmic law, the order that would allow seasons, growth, and the passage of days. Geb, the fertile ground, was the source of crops, mountains, deserts, and rivers, while Nut stretched high above, painted with shimmering stars guiding the rhythm of night and day. Though kept apart by Shu's firm embrace, their longing for each other was eternal, and the Egyptians believed that lightning and storms were signs of their attempts to reach one another across the air. Out of the union of Geb and Nut came 4 powerful deities who would shape the destiny of the cosmos: Osiris, Isis, Seth, and Nephthys. Each one carried aspects of life, death, and balance, and together they would embody both the harmony and the struggle of existence. Osiris was the god of vegetation, renewal, and the afterlife. He was often seen as the green-skinned ruler, symbolizing the fertility of the Nile, the eternal cycle of death and rebirth. Isis, his sister and consort, was a goddess of magic, motherhood, and devotion. Her wisdom and care would make her one of the most beloved deities in all of Egyptian belief. Seth, in contrast, was the force of chaos and storm, a god whose nature was both necessary and disruptive. He represented deserts, violence, and the unpredictable aspects of the world. Nephthys, his sister, was a quieter goddess, linked to protection, mourning, and the hidden mysteries that lie between life and death. These 4 children of Geb and Nut did not merely exist as distant figures. They were active presences in the stories told by priests, scribes, and ordinary people, shaping the fabric of daily life as much as the stars above or the floods of the Nile. Osiris and Isis were linked with the cycles of the river, the guarantee that crops would grow and life would be sustained. Seth was tied to the burning winds and storms of the desert, reminders that chaos was never fully gone. Nephthys stood beside them, a shadowed figure whose role was less visible but deeply vital, reminding humans of the unseen forces that protect and guide them through transition. As these divine siblings took their place in the universe, The Egyptian cosmos was no longer a flat expanse of sky and earth, but a dynamic stage, filled with characters, stories, and lessons. Creation was unfolding step by step, moving from formless waters into a structured world, a place where both harmony and conflict would weave together the tapestry of existence. For the Egyptians, this was not simply a myth, but a living truth, one that explained why the river rose, why storms raged, why life bloomed, and why death came. Every force in the universe had its divine reflection, and every human experience echoed a story first written among the gods. As Osiris, Isis, Seth, and Nephthys entered the stage of existence, the Egyptians believed that the world had reached a deeper level of structure. Before them, the cosmos had been shaped in broad strokes: earth, sky, water, and air. With their arrival, more subtle forces took form, connected to human life, morality, and the unseen balance of destiny. Osiris, the eldest, became central in the mythic memory of Egypt. He was not only the god of fertility and vegetation, but also a symbol of just rule. People imagined him as the first divine king, teaching humans how to farm, how to live in harmony with the cycles of the Nile, and how to honour the gods. Through him, order was no longer only cosmic but also earthly. Reaching into the lives of communities, Isis stood beside Osiris as a powerful presence. Known as the mistress of magic, she embodied loyalty, care, and wisdom. The Egyptians believed she had knowledge of sacred words and spells, able to heal, protect, and guide. Her devotion to her husband and her son would later become one of the most moving themes in Egyptian religion, a story of love that defied death itself. Seth, however, was a figure of tension. His domain was the desert, the storms, and the uncontrolled forces that brought danger to both gods and humans. Though often feared, he was not simply evil. In Egyptian thought, chaos was necessary to balance order, and Seth's strength was part of the equilibrium that kept the universe alive. Nephthys, often in the shadows of her siblings, was the goddess of mourning and protection. She was linked to the night, to the edges of existence, and to the rituals that prepared souls for their journey beyond life. Together with Isis, she would become a guardian of the dead, a presence of comfort in moments of transition. The Egyptians told these stories not as distant legends, but as truths woven into daily experience. The flooding of the Nile was Osiris rising again. The green fields were his blessing. The stormy winds over the desert were Seth's roar, a reminder that life was fragile. Protective amulets and prayers called upon Isis and Nephthys, invoking their unseen presence in homes and tombs alike. In this way, myth was never separate from reality. It explained why things happened, gave meaning to hardship, and offered reassurance that the gods were always near. Each ritual, each temple, each story told in the glow of oil lamps was part of maintaining the cosmic balance, first established in creation. To drift into these myths was to drift into the rhythm of Egypt itself, the rise and fall of the Nile, the turn of the stars above Nut's body, the patient silence of Geb beneath the sand. The gods were not distant rulers, but companions, ever-present reminders that order had emerged from chaos and continued to hold the fragile world together. The tale of Osiris became one of the most defining myths of Egypt, carrying the themes of life, death, and rebirth that lay at the heart of the civilization's understanding of the cosmos. According to tradition, Osiris ruled as the first divine king upon the earth. He was a just ruler, bringing agriculture, laws, and order, showing humanity how to live in harmony with the land. Under his reign, the world flourished. Fields grew green, the Nile rose predictably, and peace was said to reign among the people. Yet where there is harmony, there must also be challenge, and in the Egyptian mind this challenge was embodied by Seth, the brother of Osiris. Seth's nature was stormy, restless, and fierce, tied to the barren deserts and the violent winds that swept across them. Watching the success of Osiris, Seth grew envious. for he could not accept his brother's glory while he himself embodied the harsher side of creation. It is said that Seth plotted against Osiris with great cunning. He crafted a beautiful chest, perfectly fitted to Osiris's body, and brought it to a feast, claiming he would gift it to whoever could lie inside and fit it exactly. When Osiris entered the chest, unsuspecting, Seth and his followers sealed it tightly and cast it into the Nile. The chest drifted away, carrying Osiris far from the land he had nurtured, until it came to rest in a foreign country, lodged within the trunk of a great tree. This was not merely the loss of a king, but the disruption of cosmic balance. The earth mourned, crops withered, and the people felt the silence of their absent god. Yet the myth does not end in despair, for Isis, the devoted wife and sister of Osiris, refused to abandon him. With patience and unshakable determination, she searched across the world until she discovered the place where the chest had been hidden. She retrieved her husband's body, cradling it with sorrow and love, determined to restore him. But Seth, learning of her success, struck again. He tore the body of Osiris into many pieces and scattered them across the land, hoping to erase his brother completely. What followed became one of the most sacred quests in Egyptian religion. Isis, with the aid of her sister Nephthys, gathered each piece, travelling across Egypt, searching fields, deserts, and rivers. Wherever she found a fragment, she gave it ritual burial, and in doing so she linked the body of Osiris with the very soil of Egypt itself. In time she reassembled him, piecing together what had been broken, and through her magic Osiris was restored, not to life in the earthly realm but to a greater role, king of the underworld, ruler of the dead, and eternal judge of souls. In this way, death was no longer the end but a passage. Osiris became the promise of renewal, a god who had suffered and been restored, a symbol that life and order would continue despite the forces of chaos. For the Egyptians, this myth explained not only the turning of the seasons and the flooding of the Nile, but also the fate of every human being, who could hope to join Osiris in the afterlife and share in his eternal rebirth. With Osiris now reigning over the underworld, the Egyptians believed that the structure of existence was fully in place. Life and death were no longer opposites in conflict, but stages in a continuous cycle, bound together by divine order. Osiris, as ruler of the Duat, the mysterious realm of the dead, offered judgment and renewal, ensuring that chaos did not overwhelm the souls who passed into his care. The image of Osiris seated upon a throne, green-skinned and wrapped in white linen, holding the crook and flail as symbols of kingship, became a vision of reassurance. He was not a distant or terrifying judge, but one who had suffered himself, who understood loss and restoration, and who promised fairness to all who came before him. In the earthly realm, however, Isis's devotion did not end with the reassembly of her husband. Through her magical skill and her unwavering determination, she conceived a child by Osiris, even after his transition to the underworld. This child was Horus, destined to continue the line of divine kingship and to restore balance on earth. The birth of Horus was told as a story of triumph over despair, for it showed that even after destruction, renewal was possible, and that order could always rise again from chaos. Yet Seth still roamed the world, filled with fury that Osiris had found new purpose and that Isis had preserved his legacy. The conflict between Horus and Seth became one of the central dramas of Egyptian mythology. It was a struggle not only between two gods, but between two principles: order and chaos, fertility and barrenness, harmony and disruption. The Egyptians told of their battles stretching across land and water, sometimes in the form of men, sometimes as powerful animals, their conflict echoing the eternal tension within the universe. These contests were not described as quick victories, but as long, drawn-out struggles. Horus lost an eye in the fight, and Seth was wounded in turn. The eye of Horus, however, was healed by Thoth, the god of wisdom, and it became one of the most sacred symbols in Egyptian thought. The restored eye represented healing, protection, and completeness, a reminder that even after loss, wholeness could be achieved again. Ultimately, the tribunal of the gods declared Horus the rightful heir, granting him the throne of Egypt, while Seth was pushed aside, though never entirely removed. For the Egyptians, this resolution reflected their belief that chaos could never be fully destroyed, only restrained, kept in balance by the persistent strength of order. Kings of Egypt throughout the centuries traced their authority back to Horus, presenting themselves as his living embodiment upon the earth. Each coronation, each temple ritual, was not just a political act but a reenactment of this myth, a renewal of the promise that order would hold, and that the land would flourish under divine rule. In this way, myth and history were woven seamlessly together, the story of creation continuing through every sunrise, every harvest, and every rain. The victory of Horus over Seth marked not only the restoration of Osiris's line, but also the establishment of kingship as a divine institution in Egypt. Every pharaoh who wore the crown of Upper and Lower Egypt was seen as a living Horus, the earthly guardian of Maat, the principle of truth, balance, and cosmic order. Maat was not a goddess in the same sense as Isis or Hathor, yet she was ever present, personified as a feather or as a woman with a feather on her head. She embodied the equilibrium that held the universe together, ensuring that the sun rose each morning, that the Nile flooded at the right time, and that justice prevailed among human beings. To live in accordance with Maat was to live in harmony with creation itself. To oppose Maat was to invite the creeping return of chaos. The Egyptians believed that even the gods depended on Maat, offering her to Ra, the sun god, each morning so that his journey across the sky could be sustained. Without her, the fragile order of the cosmos might collapse back into none, the boundless waters of nothingness. The daily rituals in temples across the land were not simply acts of devotion, but essential renewals of creation. Priests, acting on behalf of the king, reenacted the primordial moments when the gods had separated sky from earth, when light first pierced the waters, when Osiris triumphed over death. In doing so, they believed they were keeping the world alive, weaving each new day into the eternal pattern. The common people, too, felt the presence of this mythic order. Farmers looked to the rising sun and the flooding river as signs that the divine cycle was intact. Craftsmen carved symbols of the Eye of Horus to protect their homes. Families placed small statues of protective deities beside their doorways, whispering prayers that echoed the great cosmic dramas. Life in Egypt was not divided into sacred and ordinary. Every breath was part of the same story, a reflection of that first creation when Atum rose from Nun. Even death, which might seem to mark an end, was understood as continuation. Osiris had shown the way. Beyond life lay another journey, another stage of being, and those who lived with Maat in their hearts could hope to be judged worthy, to walk in the fields of reeds where joy was eternal. The mythology of creation, therefore, was not only about the distant past. It was a living framework, shaping ethics, rituals, and the rhythms of daily existence. By telling and retelling the story of how order emerged from chaos, the Egyptians reminded themselves that their world was fragile but enduring, always renewed, always supported by the unseen hands of the divine. The sun itself, rising each morning over the horizon, was among the most sacred images of creation. To the Egyptians, it was not simply a ball of light, but the very heartbeat of the cosmos, the daily proof that order still prevailed. They told that Ra, the great sun god, emerged each day from the eastern horizon, sailing across the sky in his golden bark, bringing light to gods and humans alike. By evening, he descended into the western horizon, slipping into the underworld to travel through darkness before rising once more. This eternal cycle was not only a pattern of time, but a reenactment of creation itself, the first dawn repeated endlessly. Each sunrise reminded them of that moment when light first pierced the waters of Nun, when Atum's mound shimmered above the abyss. Ra was sometimes merged with Atum, sometimes with Horus, sometimes with other solar deities, but his essence was always the same, the force of illumination, life, and renewal. Yet the journey of Ra was never without peril. Each night, as his bark sailed through the Duat, he faced the serpent Apophis, embodiment of chaos and darkness. Apophis sought to swallow the sun and return the world to endless night. But Ra was defended by gods and spirits who stood guard, striking the serpent and keeping the cycle intact. This struggle was never final, for chaos could not be destroyed, only resisted. Each dawn was therefore a triumph, a sign that Maat had once again been upheld and that life would continue. The Egyptians wove this cosmic story into their temples and rituals. At dawn, hymns were sung to Ra, praising his rising as if it were the first sunrise of creation. At sunset, prayers were offered for his safe passage through the underworld. The walls of tombs were painted with detailed maps of his nightly journey, filled with guardians, gates, and sacred spells to protect him. By following Ra's cycle, the Egyptians felt themselves aligned with the deepest rhythms of the universe. Farmers rose with the sun, planting and harvesting by its warmth. Children learned that each new day was not just ordinary time but part of an unbroken chain that stretched back to the first dawn. Even the pharaoh himself was called the son of Ra, a living extension of the solar cycle, a ruler whose duty was to mirror the sun's constancy and power. In this way, the daily path of the sun was not just natural but profoundly spiritual. It was creation happening again and again, chaos held at bay by divine vigilance, like conquering darkness in eternal renewal. The nightly journey of Ra through the Duat was one of the most profound symbols of Egyptian belief. To the people along the Nile, darkness was never simple absence of light. It was a place of mystery, danger, and potential rebirth. They imagined the underworld as a vast and winding realm, filled with caverns, rivers, and gates, each guarded by beings of immense power. Ra's solar bark, glowing like fire against the shadows, travelled through this land with divine companions who recited spells and wielded weapons to fend off lurking threats. The greatest of these threats was Apophis, the serpent of unmaking, whose massive coils stretched across the pathways of night. Each evening, as Ra descended beyond the horizon, Apophis awaited him, jaws open wide, ready to swallow the sun and return existence to the chaos of none. But the Egyptians believed that the serpent could never succeed. For every night Ra's defenders struck him down with knives and fire, pinning him in chains of magic. Still, Apophis returned again and again, for chaos was eternal, and the victory of light was never final, but always renewed. This cycle reassured the Egyptians that their world was secure not because chaos was gone, but because it was always resisted. Within the Duat, Ra met not only enemies but allies as well. He was greeted by the spirits of the blessed dead, those who had lived in accordance with Maat. Their souls shone like stars, offering praise as his bark passed. To them, the journey of Ra was a promise, for just as he emerged reborn each morning, so too could the faithful hope to be renewed in the afterlife. The journey also revealed the role of Osiris, for in the deepest hours of night, Ra and Osiris were believed to unite. The sun god, symbol of life and light, joined with the lord of the underworld, guardian of death and rebirth. This sacred meeting was the moment when opposites touched. Day and night, life and death, creation and decay. From their union came the assurance that dawn would follow, that the cosmos remained unbroken. To prepare for their own passage through death, Egyptians filled tombs with texts known as the Book of the Dead, as well as earlier writings like the pyramid texts and coffin texts. These works contained prayers, spells, and maps of the Duat, guiding souls through the same gates and challenges Ra faced. The deceased was expected to stand before Osiris for judgment, their heart weighed against the feather of Maat. A heart heavy with sin would be devoured by Amit, the fearsome eater of the dead, but a heart in balance would join the eternal cycle, living in the fields of reeds where joy never ended. For the Egyptians, this vision of the afterlife was not morbid but comforting. death was not final darkness. It was a continuation of the same cosmic rhythm that carried the sun across the sky. Each person's fate was tied to the victory of Ra, the resilience of Osiris, and the eternal presence of Maat. To live rightly was to flow with that order, to walk gently in harmony with the balance of the world. The Egyptians often described creation not as a single act, but as a continuous unfolding, renewed each day by rituals, by the rising of the sun, and by the steady rhythm of the Nile. The story of the first mound, the Benben, was remembered in temples at Heliopolis, where priests honoured Atum and Ra as the first creators. There, a sacred stone was kept as a symbol of the primeval mound, the place where the god first stood when light pierced the waters of Nun. It gleamed in the sunlight, reminding all who saw it that creation was not a distant memory, but a living presence, woven into each sunrise and each flood. Other cities developed their own visions of creation, each adding unique details while still reflecting the same truth. That order had risen from chaos, and that the gods were its keepers. In Memphis, the story was told differently. Here it was Ptah, the god of craftsmen and builders, who shaped the cosmos. Ptah was said to create not by physical action, but by thought and speech. He conceived the world in his heart and spoke it into being, and through his divine word, land, sky, and life came forth. To the Memphite priests this was a profound truth, that creation could come from intellect and language, that the universe was born from the mind of a god as much as from his hands. This idea linked creation to the power of order, for words could define, separate, and sustain. In Thebes, yet another vision arose. Here, Amun was exalted as the hidden force of creation, a god so vast that his presence was beyond comprehension. He was called the Mysterious of Form, a deity unseen yet ever-present, whose breath and power lay behind all things. As Thebes grew into a great capital, the worship of Amun merged with that of Ra, forming Amun-Ra, a supreme figure embodying both the hidden mystery and the radiant light. Each city told its own creation, yet the Egyptians did not see contradiction in these stories. Rather, they saw many reflections of the same great truth, like facets of a single jewel. Creation was so immense, so profound, that it could not be captured in one version alone. The myths coexisted, layered like the desert sands, each adding richness to the understanding of the cosmos. In art and ritual, these variations blended together. A temple wall might show Atum rising on the mound, Ra sailing his bark across the sky, Ptah shaping the world with his words, and Amun hidden within all. Each was true, for each expressed a piece of the eternal unfolding. This plurality of creation myths reflected the Egyptian ability to hold many perspectives without conflict, to see unity within diversity. For them, creation was not locked in the past, but alive in every moment. When the priest lit lamps at dawn, when the people poured water on the fields, when the king offered Maat to the gods, they were not only remembering creation, but actively participating in it, renewing the order that held chaos at bay. In this way, every gesture of devotion, every act of justice, and every rising of the sun became part of the endless story of moving from chaos to cosmos. The Egyptian vision of creation also rested upon the sacred power of water. Nun, the endless primordial flood, was not only the backdrop of the beginning, but an ever-present reality, surrounding the ordered world like a vast sea of potential. The Nile itself was seen as a reflection of this eternal water. Each year, when the river swelled and overflowed its banks, Egyptians believed it was the renewal of creation, a reminder that life could only flourish because of the balance between order and the chaos of floods. The rising waters were both feared and revered, for they could bring destruction but also fertility. When the floods receded, they left behind dark, rich soil that allowed crops to grow, sustaining the people year after year. This rhythm was interpreted as the echo of that first emergence of the Benben, when dry land rose above the waters of Nun. To them, the Nile was not just a river, but a divine gift, a thread connecting the human world to the cosmic beginning. In hymns, they praised Hapi, the god of the Nile's flood, thanking him for the bounty of fields, fish, and lotus blossoms. In temples, offerings were given to ensure that the flood came neither too small nor too great, for either extreme threatened the fragile balance of life. The waters were also connected to the goddess Tefnut, who embodied moisture, and to Shu, who represented air. Together they reminded people that water and breath, flood and sky, were both born in the earliest moments of creation. Beyond the Nile, the Egyptians built sacred lakes beside temples, symbolizing Nun itself. Before entering the holy spaces, priests purified themselves in these waters, as if stepping once more out of chaos into order. In this way, every ritual began with a reenactment of creation. Water was life, but it was also mystery. In the myths, dangerous beings lurked within it, just as Apophis waited in the dark depths of night. The Egyptians knew that water could both nourish and threaten, and they saw in it the duality of creation itself. Without Nun, nothing would exist, yet if none returned unchecked, all order could vanish. This delicate tension was at the heart of their worldview. They lived daily with the awareness that chaos was never fully gone. It lapped at the edges of their fields, it shimmered in the heat of the desert, it roared in storms, but it was also the source of renewal, of fresh soil, of growth. To honour the waters was to honour the cycle of life, to acknowledge both the danger and the blessing. In quiet prayers, Egyptians asked the gods to hold chaos back just enough, to let the floods bless but not overwhelm, to keep the balance steady. Through this constant dialogue with the river, they felt connected to the first dawn of the cosmos, to the sacred moment when land first rose from the waters and light touched the world for the very first time. The act of creation was not only told through stories of gods, but also lived through rituals of kingship. The pharaoh, as the earthly representative of Horus and the son of Ra, was central to the preservation of cosmic order. His duty was far greater than ruling a nation. He was seen as the living bridge between the divine and human realms, the guarantor that the balance of Mayat would endure. Each coronation was a reenactment of the first rising of creation, with ceremonies designed to echo the separation of sky and earth, the triumph of light over darkness, and the renewal of divine harmony. The double crown worn by the king represented the unification of Upper and Lower Egypt, but symbolically it also reflected the unification of opposites, the same duality that lay at the heart of creation itself. The king's offering of Mayat to the gods was among the most sacred rituals, often carved into temple walls. In these scenes, the pharaoh kneels before a deity, holding a small figure of Mayat, symbolizing truth, balance, and justice. To offer Mayat was to confirm that the ruler upheld the same order that Atum had first established when he rose from the waters of Nun. Without this offering, the cosmos could weaken, for the Egyptians believed that the gods relied upon humanity, through the king, to renew creation. Daily rituals in temples extended this cosmic partnership. Priests acting in the king's stead awakened the gods' statues at dawn, washed them, dressed them in fine linens, and presented food and incense. These acts were not symbolic gestures, but necessary renewals of the divine presence, ensuring that the gods remained engaged with the world. Each day's ritual echoed the first day, and each morning's prayers were linked to the first sunrise. In this way, the Egyptians believed that time itself was cyclical, looping back to the origin again and again. Myths of creation were therefore not confined to ancient memory. They were woven into the present, binding every moment to the eternal beginning. Even festivals carried this theme. The said festival, celebrated after 30 years of a king's reign, renewed his strength and reaffirmed his role as the upholder of Mayat. During the rites, the pharaoh would run a ritual course, proving his vitality, and would be enthroned anew, as if creation itself were refreshed. Through such festivals, people saw that order was not static but required constant care, just as the gods themselves had once laboured to shape the cosmos from chaos. To live in Egypt was to live in awareness of this delicate balance, to know that human society, nature and divinity were threads of one fabric. Kingship was not about power alone, but about responsibility, about keeping the waters of none at bay, and ensuring that light, life, and justice continued to rise each day. Temples themselves were living symbols of creation, designed to mirror the cosmos in miniature. Their architecture reflected the Egyptian understanding of the universe. Massive pylons represented the horizon, courtyards evoked the primordial waters, and sanctuaries mirrored the sacred mound where creation first emerged. Walls were covered in carvings and paintings depicting gods, cosmic events, and mythic battles, each scene a reminder of the struggle between order and chaos. Columns often resembled papyrus and lotus plants, connecting the building to the life-giving flora that sprouted from the Nile, a reflection of how life itself emerged from the primeval flood. The alignment of temples with the sun was deliberate. Many were oriented so that at dawn or sunset, sunlight would illuminate the inner sanctum, symbolically connecting the deity within to the first light of creation. Through these structures, humans could physically enter the sacred narrative, walking through spaces that told the story of Atum's rise, Ra's journey, and the ongoing protection of Ma'at. Inside, priests carried out rituals that kept the cosmic order intact. Offerings of food, drink, and incense nourished the gods, while hymns and prayers reinforced the divine harmony. These acts were not mere ceremonies but believed to maintain the rhythm of the universe itself. Festivals transformed temples into stages for reenacting creation. During Opet and other major celebrations, statues of gods were carried in processions, moving through streets and along canals, symbolically bringing divine presence into the human realm. People participated through song, dance, and offerings, linking their own lives to the eternal cycle. Art and writing served as both record and tool, preserving myths while enabling ongoing participation. Hieroglyphs were more than words. They were magical, thought to carry the power of what they represented. By inscribing creation myths on tomb walls and temple surfaces, Egyptians were not only documenting the past, they were sustaining it, actively renewing the cosmic order with each stroke. Even the layout of cities reflected these principles. Roads and canals often aligned with celestial events, connecting earthly spaces with the movement of stars, the sun, and the moon. Agricultural practices mirrored the cycles of flooding and harvest, reinforcing the understanding that life depended upon rhythm, balance, and respect for the divine structure. Within these patterns, ordinary people found comfort. Every act, from planting seeds to observing the heavens, became a subtle participation in creation. The myths were alive, not distant stories, but ongoing truths woven into daily life. Children learned early that the world was a tapestry of light and dark, order and chaos, and that through careful attention, respect and ritual, they could maintain harmony in their own lives, just as the gods maintained the cosmos. In this way, creation was not a one-time event, but a continual unfolding, visible in temples, cities, rivers and rituals, a living story that humans and gods together sustained. Among the most profound elements of the Egyptian creation story was the role of the sun, not only as a source of light but as a living manifestation of divine energy. Ra, the sun god, was the daily reminder that order triumphed over darkness, that creation was continually renewed with each sunrise. His journey across the sky, often depicted on temple walls as a boat gliding through the heavens, was filled with both calm and peril. By day, Ra's bark traversed the sky, bringing warmth and life to the earth below. By night, he descended into the underworld, navigating treacherous waters and confronting Apophis, the serpent of chaos. This nightly struggle ensured that the sun would rise again, that life would continue, and that Ma'at would endure. Egyptians understood that creation was fragile, always at risk of unravelling, and so rituals, prayers and offerings were performed not only to honour the gods, but to sustain the cosmic balance. Solar temples, such as those at Heliopolis and Abu Simbel, were aligned to mark solstices and equinoxes, reflecting the precision of creation itself. Priests timed ceremonies to these celestial events, connecting human activity directly to the rhythm of the cosmos. The sun's light was not simply illumination, but a living force, imbuing the world with divine presence. Beyond the sun, the moon, stars, and planets were seen as companions in creation, each with its role and purpose. Thoth, the god of wisdom, tracked the heavens, maintaining the celestial calendar and ensuring that time flowed according to divine law. Nut, the sky goddess, arched over the world, swallowing the sun each evening only to give birth to it anew at dawn. These images reminded Egyptians that the universe was not static but cyclical, a series of patterns repeating endlessly yet always alive with possibility. Human life mirrored this rhythm. The rising and setting of the sun guided daily activities, planting and harvest. The waxing and waning of the moon influenced festivals, rituals, and sacred observances. Even the Nile's floods were timed by these celestial patterns, reinforcing the interconnectedness of earth, sky, and the divine. Through observation, ritual, and art, Egyptians internalized the truth that they were participants in a living creation. Every sunrise was a reminder of the god's power, every evening a reflection of the ongoing struggle between order and chaos. Children were taught stories of Ra's journey, of the serpent Apophis, of Nut and Geb, and through these tales they learned the rhythm of the universe. Life was an extension of creation, a daily opportunity to maintain Mahat, to act in harmony with the order the gods had established. In this way, the celestial bodies were not distant objects but living symbols, guides for human conduct and understanding, constant witnesses to the enduring journey from chaos to cosmos. The Egyptians also found profound meaning in the duality of their gods, reflecting the balance inherent in creation. Many deities were paired, embodying complementary forces: Geb, the earth, and Nut, the sky; Shu, air, and Tefnut, moisture; life and death; order and chaos. These pairings were not simply symbolic. They described the very mechanics of the universe, teaching that no single element could exist in isolation. The earth needed the sky to shelter it, moisture needed air to rise as clouds, and life needed both light and darkness to flourish. Myths depicted these interactions with poetic imagery: Nut stretching over Geb like a protective canopy, Shu holding them apart so that the world could exist, the sun rising from their embrace each day. In their temples and tombs, these stories were illustrated in delicate detail, carved into walls and painted in vibrant pigments. Every symbol, every figure, told of relationships that held the cosmos together. Egyptians also observed this duality in human life: birth and death, joy and sorrow, success and hardship. All were parts of a balanced world, woven into the fabric of creation itself. Rituals reinforced this understanding. Offerings to gods were never one-sided. They honoured both giving and receiving, action and reflection, creation and preservation. Priests reminded the people that Ma'at, the principle of order and harmony, depended on maintaining this equilibrium. Festivals mirrored these dualities as well. Processions, dances, and ceremonies often told stories of conflict and resolution, of struggle followed by peace, teaching participants that life itself was a reflection of the cosmic pattern. Even the natural environment reminded them of this balance: the rise and fall of the Nile, the changing seasons, the daily path of the sun, and the phases of the moon, all mirrored the eternal interplay of opposing forces, each necessary to sustain life. For the Egyptians, understanding these dualities was not merely philosophical, it was practical. It guided agriculture, governance, medicine, and family life. The stories of gods provided a framework for interpreting the world, showing how every action could either uphold or disrupt balance. In this sense, creation was not only a distant past event, but an ongoing process in which humans participated every day. To live in Egypt was to be aware of the delicate harmony that supported all life, to recognize that chaos was always near yet could be managed through awareness, ritual, and reverence. By embracing the dual nature of existence, the Egyptians found meaning, resilience, and a profound connection to the cosmos, participating in a story that began before time and would continue long after their own lives ended. The process of creation in Egyptian thought was not only cosmic but deeply practical, woven into everyday life. Farmers, priests, and artisans all participated in rituals and actions that reflected the eternal order established at the beginning. Planting crops, for example, was timed to coincide with the rising of specific stars, marking the annual flooding of the Nile, which mirrored the emergence of land from the waters of Nun. By aligning human activity with celestial rhythms, Egyptians ensured that life followed the same patterns that had guided the first moments of creation. Temples served as hubs for both spiritual and practical life, housing astronomical observatories and granaries, linking ritual with survival. Within these sacred spaces, the god's presence was believed to flow through statues and images, activated by the prayers and offerings of the faithful. Each morning, the ritual of awakening the gods was a reminder that life depended upon participation in maintaining balance. Even artisans were part of this ongoing creation. Sculptors carving statues of deities, painters illustrating tomb walls, and scribes inscribing hieroglyphs were not merely making art. They were reinforcing the cosmic order through precision and reverence. Colours, shapes, and proportions were all guided by symbolic principles that connected the work to divine patterns. Festivals amplified this connection. During major celebrations, the stories of creation were enacted through dance, music, and procession, allowing entire communities to experience the sacred narrative. The journey of gods across the sky, the struggle against chaos, and the triumph of Maat were not abstract ideas but lived experiences, providing rhythm and structure to the year. Within homes, smaller rituals reflected these grander patterns. Families offered bread and beer to household gods, lit lamps to symbolize the sun's life-giving light, and recited prayers that echoed the language of temples. Children grew up understanding that the world was alive with divine energy, that their daily actions mattered, and that they were participants in sustaining the universe. Even in death, the principle of creation persisted. Tombs were carefully constructed to preserve the body and provide a path for the soul, reflecting the cyclical nature of existence. Funerary text recounted the journey through the underworld, where the deceased navigated dangers, just as the sun navigated the night, emerging renewed at dawn. In every aspect of Egyptian life, from the smallest gesture to the grandest ritual, creation was not a distant myth but a continuous, unfolding reality. Humans were co-creators, guardians of order, and witnesses to the eternal interplay of light and darkness, chaos and cosmos, life and death. Symbols played a crucial role in Egyptian creation myths, serving as reminders of divine principles in both sacred and daily life. The ankh, representing life, was more than a decorative motif. It symbolized the eternal flow of energy that connected gods, humans, and the cosmos. The Djed pillar, representing stability, reminded Egyptians that order must be maintained against the ever-present threat of chaos. Scarabs, associated with the rising sun and rebirth, illustrated the continuous cycle of creation, transformation, and renewal. These symbols appeared everywhere, on temple walls, in tombs, on jewellery, and even on the tools of farmers and craftsmen. They served as visual affirmations of the principles established at the dawn of time, reinforcing the understanding that the universe was interconnected and alive. Priests and scribes meticulously used these symbols in rituals and texts, knowing that each line and curve carried a sacred power. The Book of the Dead, for instance, contained spells and depictions designed to guide the soul through the afterlife, connecting the deceased with the same energies that had shaped the world itself. Each ritual action, from offering incense to reciting hymns, was believed to resonate with the forces that first separated light from darkness, air from water, and order from chaos. Even architecture echoed these principles. Temples were often aligned with celestial bodies, creating a bridge between the heavens and the earth. Pylons, courtyards, and sanctuaries were designed to lead worshippers from the outer world toward the innermost sanctuary, symbolizing the journey from chaos to the center of divine order. The Nile itself was central to this symbolic framework. Its annual flooding mirrored the emergence of life from the primordial waters of Nun, renewing the land and reflecting the original act of creation. Farmers timed their planting and harvesting with precision, ensuring that human activity remained in harmony with natural and divine cycles. In homes, smaller symbols reinforced these patterns. Amulets, statues, and inscriptions provided daily reminders of Ma'at, the principle of balance and justice, guiding moral behavior and reinforcing communal cohesion. Even ordinary objects, bowls, ropes, and tools, often bore inscriptions or carvings connecting them to divine patterns. Through these symbols, Egyptians experienced a sense of continuity and participation in creation. Life itself became a ritual, every action a thread in the fabric of the cosmos. The gods were never distant. Their presence was tangible in the rhythms of nature, the structures of society, and the objects of daily life. Understanding, respecting, and embodying these symbols allowed humans to maintain balance, ensure prosperity, and honour the sacred principles upon which the universe was founded. In this way, Egyptian creation myths were living guides, offering both meaning and practical wisdom for navigating the cycles of existence. Rituals surrounding water held a special significance in Egyptian creation stories, reflecting the origin of life itself from the primeval waters of Nun. Water was seen as both protective and regenerative, carrying the essence of life to all beings and linking the human realm to the divine. Daily cleansing rituals, whether in temples or private homes, symbolized not only physical purity but the renewal of spiritual energy, connecting the participant to the original act of creation. Sacred lakes and canals within temple complexes represented the boundless waters from which the first mound emerged, where Atum brought forth the first gods. Priests performed ceremonies in these waters, using them to bless offerings, statues, and even food, ensuring that divine power was infused into the physical world. The Nile itself was central to these practices. Its cyclical flooding was celebrated as a manifestation of creation repeating annually, depositing fertile soil and sustaining life across the land. Observing the river's rise and fall, Egyptians developed agricultural calendars and connected their labour to cosmic rhythms, aligning human activity with the enduring cycles of existence. Beyond the Nile, symbolic water features in tombs and shrines acted as metaphors for transition and rebirth. Pools and basins mirrored the flow of divine energy, providing the soul a path through both life and death. Boats, another recurring symbol, carried gods across these sacred waters, illustrating journeys of creation, travel through the underworld, and the renewal of life. Even the design of everyday objects often reflected these water motifs. Curved shapes, wave patterns, and depictions of aquatic creatures reinforced the connection between physical existence and cosmic order. Myths themselves often placed water at the centre of conflict and resolution. Stories of gods battling chaotic forces in rivers or seas served as metaphors for the constant struggle between order and entropy, teaching that maintaining balance required vigilance, ritual, and understanding. Communities participated through offerings, songs, and processions, turning ordinary acts into expressions of universal principles. Children learned early that water was sacred, its movement a reminder of life's fragility and its resilience. Through observation, imitation, and ritual, humans internalized the lessons of the cosmos, that existence depended upon rhythm, care, and alignment with divine forces. In this way, water was not merely a resource but a living symbol, a medium through which creation persisted, order was maintained, and the connection between humans and gods was continuously renewed. Every gesture, from scooping water to blessing a statue, echoed the same principle. Life itself is a continual unfolding of creation, a balance between giving and receiving, action and reflection, order and the ever-present possibility of chaos. The Egyptian understanding of time was deeply connected to creation, as they saw the universe not as linear but cyclical. Days, months, and years reflected repeating patterns, each echoing the movements of the sun, moon, and stars. This cyclical view emphasized that creation was ongoing, a continuous process rather than a single event fixed in the past. The rising and setting of the sun symbolized birth, struggle, death, and renewal, teaching that the universe was perpetually regenerating itself. Festivals and rituals were timed to these celestial cycles, reinforcing the human connection to the divine rhythms. The new year, marked by the heliacal rising of Sirius, coincided with the inundation of the Nile, symbolizing both the rebirth of the land and the ongoing act of creation. Priests meticulously recorded astronomical events, connecting the motions of celestial bodies to the order established by the gods at the dawn of time. Temples were constructed with precise alignments to the stars, ensuring that light and shadow interacted with sacred spaces in ways that mirrored cosmic patterns. Egyptians believed that by observing and respecting these rhythms, they participated in sustaining Ma'at, the divine balance that held chaos at bay. Human activity, whether in agriculture, governance, or religious practice, was therefore inseparable from the cycles of creation. Even storytelling and education were aligned with these concepts. Children learned the myths of gods and cosmic events in tandem with observing natural phenomena, internalizing a worldview in which every occurrence reflected larger universal principles. Seasonal changes were interpreted not simply as weather patterns, but as manifestations of the gods' ongoing work, a visible sign that the forces of creation were alive and active. The cyclical nature of time also shaped their views of life and death. Birth was mirrored by rebirth, decay by regeneration, and mortality by eternal continuity. Funerary practices, including the careful preservation of the body and recitation of sacred texts, were designed to ensure that the individual remained aligned with cosmic order. Life was understood as a series of moments woven into the grand tapestry of the universe, each action contributing to the stability and harmony of all existence. By embracing this cyclical understanding, Egyptians cultivated patience, awareness, and reverence. They recognized that creation was both a personal and communal responsibility, that their daily actions had the power to maintain or disrupt balance. In every sunrise, every festival, every flood, and every ritual, they were reminded that they were not passive observers, but active participants in the eternal story from chaos to cosmos. Art and architecture were not only expressions of Egyptian culture, but also instruments of creation, linking human craftsmanship to divine order. Temples, tombs, and monuments were designed with careful attention to proportion, symmetry, and orientation, reflecting the balance established at the beginning of time. Walls were adorned with murals depicting gods, cosmic events, and rituals, each image reinforcing the ongoing process of creation and the maintenance of Ma'at. Even the choice of colours carried meaning. Blue symbolised the life-giving Nile and the heavens. Gold represented the eternal light of the sun and the immortality of the gods, and green stood for growth, fertility, and renewal. Sculptors, painters, and architects worked with the understanding that their creations were not merely artistic, but sacred. Each line, curve, and carving was an act of participation in the divine narrative. Obelisks reached toward the sky, echoing the first emergence of land from the primordial waters, and pyramids aligned with stars demonstrated the Egyptians' awareness of celestial order. Hieroglyphs, too, were more than writing. They were symbols imbued with power, connecting spoken language to cosmic forces. Every inscription in temples and tombs was intended to preserve the harmony of the universe and provide guidance for both gods and humans. The placement of statues, altars, and shrines followed symbolic logic, creating spaces where humans could engage directly with the divine. In homes, smaller objects continued these patterns. Figurines, amulets, and painted scenes reinforced the principles of creation and balance, offering everyday reminders that life was interwoven with sacred energy. Festivals further reinforced this connection. Processions, music, and dance allowed communities to embody myths physically, enacting the struggles of gods against chaos, the triumph of order, and the cyclical renewal of life. Participants internalized these lessons, developing an understanding that humans were co-creators, responsible for sustaining harmony in the world. Even mundane activities like farming or weaving were interpreted through this lens. Each action could either uphold balance or risk disorder. The Nile's rhythms, the cycles of the sun and stars, and the changing seasons were continuously observed and incorporated into these practices, providing a direct link between human life and cosmic patterns. Through art and architecture, Egyptians experienced creation not only intellectually but physically, feeling their connection to a universe that was alive, responsive, and ordered. In this way, creativity became a sacred act, a meditation on the principles of existence, and a continuous engagement with the eternal story from chaos to cosmos. Every temple carved, every mural painted, and every ritual performed served as a bridge between the human and the divine, linking the present moment to the timeless origins of creation and the ongoing balance that sustained all life. Music and sound played an essential role in the Egyptian conception of creation, resonating with the forces that had shaped the universe. Instruments such as sistrums, drums, and flutes were used in rituals not merely for entertainment, but as a means to align human vibration with divine energy. The repetitive rhythms of drumming mimicked the heartbeat of the cosmos, reinforcing order and the cyclical nature of existence. Hymns and chants, often recited in temples or during festivals, recounted the emergence of the first gods, the separation of land from waters, and the triumph of Mayat over chaos. The spoken word held magical power. By pronouncing the names of gods, humans were believed to activate their presence, sustaining cosmic balance. Music accompanied processions, sacred dances, and ceremonial reenactments of creation myths, allowing communities to embody the story physically and emotionally. Even in the simplest rituals, such as offerings to household deities, sound played a subtle but vital role. The rustle of leaves, the pouring of water, and the striking of small cymbals were carefully integrated to maintain harmony with the spiritual world. Priests trained for years to master the correct intonation and rhythm, understanding that each note carried energy capable of influencing both human and divine realms. In this way, Egyptian society experienced creation as a living, auditory phenomenon. Sound was a bridge connecting people to the primordial moment when the universe first emerged from the waters of Nun. The interplay of silence and resonance mirrored the balance between chaos and order, demonstrating that every aspect of existence had a place within the cosmic pattern. Festivals amplified this connection. During major celebrations, music guided processions along temple corridors, through sacred lakes and into sanctuaries, marking the movement of the sun across the sky and the journey of gods through both day and night. Participants felt themselves immersed in a universe that was not static but vibrant, alive with energy and constantly renewing itself. Children learned to recognize these sounds, understanding that music, like ritual and art, was a form of communication with the divine. By internalizing rhythms, individuals attuned themselves to the cycles of creation, from the rising sun to the flood of the Nile, from life to death and back again. Through music, humans became co-creators, actively participating in the orchestration of existence, reinforcing order and sustaining the harmony that had been established at the very dawn of time. Sound was therefore both practical and sacred, a reminder that creation is not only seen but heard, experienced, and perpetually renewed through attentive presence, ritual action, and communal participation. The Egyptians believed that language itself was an instrument of creation, a bridge between thought and the cosmos. Words, particularly the sacred names of gods, were thought to contain the essence of what they described, shaping reality through sound and intention. Scribes and priests meticulously recorded myths, hymns, and spells, knowing that written symbols could sustain the universe by preserving the order established at the dawn of time. Hieroglyphs, with their careful shapes and arrangements, were not merely a writing system but a map of divine principles, each symbol carrying both meaning and energy. Writing was considered a form of magic, capable of influencing the natural and spiritual worlds, ensuring that Mayat remained in place and chaos was held at bay. Education was therefore deeply spiritual. Learning to write was akin to learning to participate in the act of creation itself. Temples housed libraries of sacred texts, where knowledge of rituals, cosmology, and divine order was preserved. Students observed priests as they performed rituals, learning that every word spoken had purpose and potency. Even mundane inscriptions, such as those on tombs or household objects, were infused with symbolic significance, connecting daily life to the larger patterns of existence. Beyond temples, these principles guided rulers and officials. Decrees, proclamations, and edicts were carefully worded to reflect balance, justice, and divine authority, ensuring that governance was aligned with cosmic order. The pharaoh, seen as a living embodiment of divine will, relied on the power of language to maintain harmony across the land. Every public speech, ceremonial proclamation, and engraved inscription reinforced the principle that humans were active participants in sustaining creation. In homes, individuals used simple inscriptions, amulets, and labels to protect themselves, their families, and their possessions, believing that the correct words could channel the protective energy of the gods. Rituals often included the recitation of sacred texts, blending sound, intention, and symbolism to strengthen the connection between humans and the divine. By practicing mindful speech, careful writing, and thoughtful articulation, Egyptians experienced the continuous interplay between human action and cosmic stability. In this worldview, creation was never complete. It was an ongoing process in which every word and gesture had significance. Humans, gods, and the universe were inextricably linked, each sustaining the other. Through language, Egyptians were reminded that the fabric of reality depended not only on divine power, but also on human awareness, participation, and care. Writing and speech became tools of mindfulness, instruments to uphold harmony, and a living connection to the eternal cycle from chaos to cosmos, ensuring that the universe remained balanced, vibrant, and full of life. The stars themselves were seen as living reflections of creation, guiding humans and marking the passage of time. Constellations were interpreted as gods, mythic animals, or divine events, and their movement across the night sky mirrored the cycles of life, death, and renewal on Earth. The Egyptians observed the heavens carefully, noting the rising and setting of particular stars to signal planting and harvesting seasons, festivals, and religious ceremonies. Among the most important was Sirius, whose appearance before dawn heralded the annual inundation of the Nile, bringing fertile silt to the land and symbolizing the rebirth of creation. Temples were often aligned with specific stars, their doorways, windows, and corridors constructed to interact with celestial light at critical moments of the year. This alignment reinforced the idea that human structures could participate in the cosmic order, capturing divine energy and sustaining harmony. Astronomy was intertwined with religion, architecture, and daily life, creating a seamless connection between observation and myth. Priests, astronomers, and scholars developed intricate calendars, predicting solar and lunar cycles, eclipses, and planetary movements, linking celestial patterns to earthly events. Myths describe the gods' journeys across the sky, battles against chaotic forces, and the maintenance of Ma'at, teaching that every aspect of the universe was interconnected. Humans were expected to act in accordance with these rhythms, whether through ritual, agriculture, or governance, aligning themselves with the harmony reflected in the heavens. The Nile, stars, and seasons together created a framework in which life was experienced as part of an ongoing cosmic dance. By understanding celestial patterns, Egyptians cultivated awareness of their role in sustaining balance, recognizing that even small actions could resonate through the web of existence. Astrology was not merely predictive, it was instructional, providing guidance on how to live in harmony with the forces that shape the world. By observing the heavens, humans could anticipate challenges, honor the gods, and maintain equilibrium between order and chaos. Children learn to recognize constellations and their meanings, internalizing a sense of place within the universe. Art, ritual, and architecture reflected these celestial truths, embedding cosmic knowledge in everyday experience. In this way, the sky became a canvas for divine storytelling, an instrument of education, and a mirror of the ongoing creative process. By living in tune with the stars, Egyptians participated actively in creation, ensuring that the universe remained balanced, vibrant, and continuously renewing itself, a timeless reflection of the journey from chaos to cosmos. Rituals and daily practices were not only acts of devotion, but also ways to participate in the ongoing creation of the world. Egyptians believed that the smallest gestures, if performed with intention and respect, could reinforce the harmony of the universe. Offerings of food, incense, and water to the gods were symbolic acts of replenishing the divine order, echoing the original acts of creation when life emerged from the waters of Nun. Temples were living centers of this sacred work. Priests performed ceremonies at precise times, chanting hymns and performing gestures designed to mirror the movements of celestial bodies and the gods themselves. Even outside the temple, ordinary people engaged in rituals within their homes, lighting lamps, placing amulets, and reciting protective prayers to maintain balance and invite divine favor. Festivals were a grand extension of this practice. During these times, the community collectively enacted myths, reenacting the victories of gods over chaotic forces, the separation of heaven and earth, and the cycles of death and renewal. Music, dance, and procession allowed participants to feel themselves as active components of creation, embodying the cosmic order in their movements and intentions. Agriculture, central to Egyptian life, was also deeply tied to these cycles. Planting, harvesting, and irrigation were conducted according to the rhythms of the Nile and the stars, reinforcing the understanding that human activity was inseparable from the divine order. Farmers, by following these natural and sacred patterns, ensured not only the survival of their communities, but also the maintenance of cosmic balance. Education and storytelling complemented these practices, teaching each generation the myths, values, and principles necessary to sustain Ma'at. Children learned through observation, imitation, and recitation, internalizing the understanding that life was a continuous act of creation. Health, work, governance, and personal behavior were all informed by this worldview. Through conscious participation in rituals, whether grand or simple, humans were recognized as co-creators, sustaining the universe through their attention and care. Even death was incorporated into this system of understanding. Funerary practices ensured that individuals remained aligned with cosmic order beyond life, preserving their connection to the cycles of creation. Tombs, inscriptions, and offerings served as both guidance and protection, linking the departed to the forces that shape the world. Every act, from planting a seed to performing a prayer, was thus an acknowledgement of the ongoing process from chaos to cosmos. Egyptians lived in awareness that creation was never static. The universe required continuous care, intention, and recognition of the divine order, and through their rituals, art, and daily actions, they became partners in sustaining life, harmony, and the eternal flow of the cosmos. The role of water, particularly the Nile, was central to the Egyptian understanding of creation and life itself. Water represented the primordial nun, the endless chaos from which all existence arose, and the annual inundation of the river mirrored the original emergence of life. Villages and cities developed along the banks of the Nile, their routines dictated by its flow, creating a deep connection between the physical and spiritual worlds. Farmers relied on the flooding to deposit fertile silt, ensuring that crops could grow and sustain the population. But beyond its practical function, water held sacred meaning. It was both life-giving and symbolic of the chaotic potential that existed before order was established. Ritual purification involved the use of water in temples and homes, washing hands, faces, and sacred objects to maintain spiritual and cosmic cleanliness. These acts were more than hygiene. They were a means of participating in the divine maintenance of Ma'at. Sacred lakes, canals, and pools within temple complexes reflected the cosmic waters, offering places for reflection, meditation, and ceremonial immersion. Priests performed ritual washing of statues of gods, reaffirming the connection between human action and divine presence. Water was also linked to resurrection and renewal. Funerary rites often included the symbolic use of water to cleanse the deceased and prepare them for rebirth in the afterlife, reinforcing the understanding that creation was continuous and cyclical. Even in art, water motifs appeared in murals, reliefs, and hieroglyphs, illustrating the flow of life, the emergence of land, and the interaction between gods and humans. Boats, used both in daily transport and in religious ceremonies, symbolized the journey of the sun across the sky and the voyage of souls in the afterlife, connecting human experience to the cosmic cycle. Music and chants accompanied water rituals, echoing the rhythms of the river and the universe, creating harmony between movement, sound, and sacred intent. Communities observed the ebb and flow of the Nile with reverence, planning activities, festivals, and religious observances around its cycles. This attentiveness cultivated an awareness of the delicate balance between order and chaos, life and death, human action, and cosmic forces. By honouring water, Egyptians recognized their role in the ongoing maintenance of creation, understanding that even the smallest action could influence the harmony of the world. In this worldview, water was both literal and symbolic, a medium through which humans could engage with the divine, sustain life, and ensure that the universe remained in continuous balanced motion from chaos to cosmos, an ever-renewing cycle of existence that encompassed all living things. Temples were the physical manifestation of the cosmic order, constructed to embody the principles of creation and the presence of the gods. Their architecture, carefully aligned with celestial bodies and geographic features, reflected the separation of heaven and earth that occurred in the earliest moments of the universe. Columns, walls, and sanctuaries were not only functional but symbolic, representing mountains, rivers, and the primordial landscape from which life emerged. Sacred spaces contained statues, altars, and reliefs depicting the gods' interactions with humans and the maintenance of Ma'at. The central sanctum, housing the deity's image, was considered the point of convergence between the divine and the earthly realms, a place where the energies of creation could be accessed and directed. Daily temple rituals ensured that these energies remained active. Priests performed offerings, chants, and symbolic gestures to sustain the balance between order and chaos. Each action, whether lighting a lamp, pouring water, or presenting incense, was a precise reflection of cosmic processes, translating divine principles into human action. Festivals amplified these practices, bringing the community together to enact myths, honour deities, and celebrate seasonal cycles. Music, dance, and processions transformed ordinary streets into sacred spaces, reminding participants that life itself was intertwined with the divine order. Temples also served as centres of learning. Scribes and priests preserved knowledge of cosmology, rituals, and ethical principles, teaching future generations how to live in accordance with the universe. This education reinforced the understanding that humans were not passive observers, but active participants in sustaining creation. Everyday life, from agriculture to governance, was influenced by these teachings. Decisions about when to plant, harvest, or hold ceremonies were guided by the rhythms of the stars and the cycles of the Nile. Rulers, aware of their role as mediators between gods and humans, used temple alignments and ritual observances to legitimize authority and maintain harmony across the land. Even art and decoration reflected cosmic principles. Murals, carvings, and inscriptions depicted stories of creation, divine battles against chaos, and the cyclical renewal of life, integrating myth into everyday experience. Through these tangible expressions, Egyptians continuously engaged with the process of creation, reminding themselves that the universe required constant care, attention, and alignment with divine principles. The temple was more than a building. It was a living symbol of order, a place where humans could connect with the gods, participate in sustaining Ma'at, and experience the ongoing journey from chaos to cosmos. By entering its sacred spaces, individuals were invited to recognize their role in the eternal cycle, becoming co-creators in a universe that was vibrant, ordered, and eternally renewing itself. Art and symbolism were powerful tools through which the Egyptians connected with the cosmos and its unfolding creation. Every image, sculpture, and painting carried layers of meaning, acting as both a record of myth and a guide for spiritual practice. Gods were depicted with distinctive features, combining human and animal elements, each representing specific aspects of the natural and divine order. The falcon-headed Horus embodied kingship and the sky, while the lioness-headed Sekhmet represented strength and the protective forces of chaos subdued by divine power. Colours held symbolic weight. Gold reflected eternal light and the divine. Blue represented the life-giving waters and the heavens, while green symbolized growth, fertility, and rebirth. Scenes in tombs and temples often portrayed the sun's journey, the triumph of order over chaos, and the ongoing creation of life, reinforcing the interconnectedness of all things. Hieroglyphs intertwined with these images, providing narrative and magical potency, as the act of writing and reading them was seen as a continuation of creation itself. These visual stories guided human behavior, teaching ethical principles, encouraging reverence for the divine, and illustrating the consequences of disrupting cosmic harmony. Craftsmen approached their work with precision, understanding that every line, curve, and proportion resonated with deeper meaning. Even mundane objects like pottery, jewellery, and amulets were imbued with symbolic power, connecting daily life to the eternal cycles of the universe. Music and dance complemented visual art, bringing myth to life through rhythm, melody, and movement. Processions and ceremonial performances allowed participants to embody the roles of gods, humans, and cosmic forces, making abstract principles tangible. Storytelling, passed orally or through inscriptions, reinforced these lessons, ensuring that each generation internalized the rhythms of creation, the responsibilities of human action, and the beauty of cosmic order. Egyptians understood that their world was not static. Creation was ongoing, fragile, and required conscious participation. By observing rituals, honouring the gods, and engaging in artistic expression, individuals maintained harmony and contributed to the eternal cycle from chaos to cosmos. The cosmos was a living canvas, and humans were both observers and co-creators, continuously weaving their actions into the grand narrative of existence. In this way, the visual, auditory, and textual arts became a meditation on life, death, and renewal, a gentle reminder that the universe was sustained through attention, intention, and reverence, and that every person could participate in maintaining the delicate balance that held the world together. Even daily life was intertwined with the principles of creation. as Egyptians sought to live in harmony with the universe in every action. From the moment they rose in the morning, their routines echoed the cosmic rhythms established at the dawn of time. Families followed cycles aligned with the sun, stars, and Nile, planning work, rest, and worship according to these natural patterns. Clothing, diet, and hygiene were not merely practical but also ritualized, reflecting awareness of purity, balance, and the sacred forces at play in the world. Personal altars within homes allowed families to make offerings, chant prayers, and honor gods, reinforcing the idea that each individual had a role in sustaining cosmic order. Schools and educational systems emphasized these principles, teaching children to read hieroglyphs, understand myths, and participate in rituals that connected them to the ongoing creation of the universe. Storytelling remained central, as myths explained not only the origins of the world, but also the proper ways to live, act, and interact with others. Moral and ethical behavior was seen as an extension of cosmic order. Injustice, negligence, or disrespect could disrupt harmony, while conscious, careful action reinforced the balance of Mayat. Even governance and law reflected these cosmological principles. Pharaohs were regarded as divine mediators, responsible for ensuring stability, justice, and alignment between humans and the gods. Their decrees, construction projects, and ceremonial acts symbolically mirrored the actions of the gods during creation, separating order from chaos, shaping society, and providing a model for human conduct. Trade, craftsmanship, and agriculture were also infused with symbolic meaning, each practice echoing patterns established in the earliest moments of existence. Farmers observed the rise of Sirius and the flooding of the Nile to plan planting, while artisans ensured that their work reflected divine proportions, colours, and symbolic forms. Even simple acts like pouring water or lighting a lamp carried spiritual significance, reinforcing the awareness that humans were co-creators, maintaining the balance of the world. Through this careful, attentive living, Egyptians experienced their existence not as a series of disconnected events, but as a continuous participation in the unfolding cosmos. Each day was an opportunity to contribute to harmony, to honour the gods, and to sustain life in alignment with the rhythms of creation. By embedding awareness, ritual, and respect into everyday actions, Egyptians maintained the delicate equilibrium that allowed the world to thrive, ensuring that the journey from chaos to cosmos continued moment by moment in an eternal, gentle flow. Death, in the Egyptian worldview, was not an end but a transition, a continuation of the cosmic process in which humans remained connected to the divine order. Tombs, funerary rituals, and the careful preservation of the body were designed to ensure that the deceased could navigate the afterlife in harmony with Mayat, the eternal principle of order. Mummies, coffins, and the accompanying grave goods were not only practical or decorative, they were symbolic tools that allowed the soul to maintain its place in the ongoing cycle of creation. Inscriptions and spells from texts like the Book of the Dead served as guides, helping the departed understand the path ahead, avoid dangers, and affirm their alignment with the cosmic order. Offerings left by family members continued this care, feeding both the body and spirit while reinforcing the human role in maintaining harmony. The journey through the Duat, the Egyptian underworld, mirrored the larger cycles of life and creation. Trials, encounters with deities, and the weighing of the heart reflected the challenges of sustaining Mayat and overcoming chaos. Success meant rebirth, alignment with cosmic principles, and entry into eternal life, while failure signalled a disruption of balance that could ripple across the universe. This perspective shaped not only funerary practices but also daily living. Awareness of mortality encouraged attention, intention, and reverence in all actions, reminding Egyptians that every gesture could support or undermine the cosmic flow. Dreams, visions, and omens were interpreted as messages from the divine, subtle ways in which the universe communicated its ongoing needs for balance and care. Art, music, and literature often depicted these themes, reinforcing the understanding that creation was continuous, cyclical, and dependent on conscious participation. Even monumental structures such as pyramids and temples were designed with the afterlife in mind, ensuring that human actions in the physical world had resonance beyond death. In this sense, life itself was a sacred project, a daily engagement with the forces that shaped the universe. By living in accordance with the principles of Ma'at, observing rituals and honouring both gods and ancestors, Egyptians became partners in creation, sustaining the flow from chaos to cosmos. Their world was a constant interplay of beginnings and endings, of order emerging from potential disorder, and of humans acting in harmony with the eternal rhythms that governed all existence. Through mindful participation in these cycles, they affirmed that creation was not a singular event of the past, but a living, breathing process in which every being played a meaningful role, ensuring continuity, balance, and the gentle unfolding of life. In the final reflection of the Egyptian creation story, the interplay between chaos and order becomes a meditation on the continuity of life and the role of humans within the cosmos. The universe, once formless and silent, continues to unfold through cycles, rhythms, and patterns that echo the earliest emergence of existence. Egyptians understood that their world was not static. Every sunrise, every flooding of the Nile, every growth of a crop, and every act of kindness or reverence participated in sustaining the balance of creation. Temples, art, music, and ritual served as reminders that the cosmos was alive and that humans were co-creators, entrusted with maintaining harmony and supporting the ongoing dialogue between the divine and the earthly. The principle of Ma'at was central. It was the measure of truth, balance, and justice, a force that governed not only the physical world, but also the moral and spiritual dimensions of life. By living attentively, by honouring the cycles of the sun and river, by engaging in acts of worship and reflection, people contributed to the delicate equilibrium that allowed life to thrive. Even in the face of chaos, storms, conflicts, or natural disasters, the knowledge that order could be restored through mindful action and alignment with divine principles provided comfort, guidance, and purpose. Myths, stories, and artistic expressions became tools for understanding, preserving, and transmitting this awareness, embedding the lessons of creation into culture and daily practice. From the earliest moments when the first mound emerged from the waters of Nun to the present day, Egyptians recognized that existence was a continuous process of emergence, transformation, and renewal. Each individual, in their own way, participated in this flow, supporting the universe's gentle balance, sustaining life, and reflecting the sacred order of the cosmos. The cycles of birth, death, and renewal, of light and darkness, of growth and decay, all converged into a vision of harmony, where humans and gods shared responsibility for the ongoing story of creation. As the sun sets over the desert and the Nile reflects the stars, the eternal rhythm of the universe persists, whispering the ancient truth that life, order, and the cosmos are inseparably intertwined. In this way, the Egyptian understanding of creation offers not only a mythic account of the world's origins, but also a timeless lesson, that the cosmos is a living, breathing entity, and that by acting with awareness, respect, and care, every person can play a part in the ongoing journey from chaos to cosmos, ensuring that balance, life, and renewal endure forever.